Yes, great scenes out of Mexico there. Welcome to Left Reckoning, folks. Hello, David.
Hey Matt, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. What did we just witness there, David?
Reports there, crowd of around 180,000 people at the Zocalo in Mexico City, chanting "Free Palestine" with the Puerto Rican rapper Residente. Uh, Really inspiring and powerful to see something like that. We got a lot to get to, but I will just try to remind folks of the fact that the world is with the Palestinian people, and we're seeing that more and more show itself, and it's very inspiring to be reminded to just the extent and the power of that kind of collective show of humanity.
Yeah, it's something that I've been seeing a lot more Hasbara bots, pro-Israel bots on Twitter and social media widely lately. And it's funny when that part of reality has to slip in, when you'll see a lot of people saying like the Democrats can't go into the next election on this "I hate Israel" thing. That's not good politics. That's only popular in the other parts of the world. Well, actually, I think it's kind of popular everywhere besides Israel, actually.
No, 100%, and it affects everybody. I mean, not to get too much get too ahead of ourselves, but James Tallarico has announced that he's going to run for Senate here in Texas. And, people I think rightfully were asking questions about what his position on Palestine and on Gaza is. And you'll hear this kind of chorus of folks being like, oh, why are you talking about Palestine? What does that have to do with Texas and Texas politics? Which is truly an absurd thing to say because Texas, in many ways, is at the forefront of the pro genocide attack on free speech and democracy in this country. This is a state where we're seeing the government continue to wage war on students, on workers at universities, at people all across the state for speaking the truth, speaking about the reality of the genocide that is happening in Gaza, showing opposition to Zionism and this assault on humanity and decency that is represented by the state of Israel today. No, it is actually extremely pertinent to hear about what somebody's position on that issue is everywhere in this country, but especially here.
Yeah, that response is only appropriate when it came to years ago, when many states, including Texas, were instituting these anti-BDS laws, where if you wanted to have a kind of state role or any sort of position, like a teacher or whatever, you need to promise not to boycott Israel. Yeah, then you can say, hey, what does this have to do with anything? Um, I mean, actually, even then, even if we didn't have anti-BDS laws, we should not be paying for bombs for
No,
Israel to drop on civilians, or guns for settlers to shoot civilians with. It's disgusting.
no, 100%. And we got a full show today. We're going to be talking a little bit about that Senate race towards the end of the show. We also have a really great conversation with Nilo Tabrizy about the women life freedom movement in Iran. And Nilo has a really exciting and excellent new book out, and we'll be talking about that a little bit, kind of categorizing, understanding the long term effects of that movement. In addition to, I don't know, I think a lot of interesting questions about how to cover movements like that. From the U.S. I think that it was a really rich conversation. So that and much more coming up soon. And I know we're going to be talking about this Epstein thing, but I did want to mention because we did open the show talking about the overwhelming support for the Palestinian people that we're seeing all across the globe. Um, that Israel has doubled down on their assault on Gaza City. They've called for people to evacuate as they continue to slaughter and kill people. And despite all of the kind of rhetoric that we might have heard, Israel has shown no interest in stopping the killings. And it's going to take more than what we've given. And it's important to remember how many people are committed to this fight, and the willingness of folks to come out and take on real serious consequences from their employers and their government to oppose this. But it is not over yet.
Yeah, what's happening with the Gaza City thing is, um, approaching. I mean, I've used the word Holocaust before for the type of, you look at people swarming around rubble trying to get aid or on aid sites and being shot at in like cattle pens. Gaza City, to tell people to leave Gaza City, people are there because they have been leaving places they're being bombed. The population of Gaza City was like 500,000 before October 7th. It's now up to 1 million. I mean, this is what we're seeing as final solution type activity by the Israelis. And there's this tweet here by Robert Inlakesh. Israel has bombed Qatar, Tunisia, Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria in the past 24 hours. It openly slaughters anyone who chooses. It chooses anywhere it likes, yet there are never consequences. In fact, Israel's president, who praised the attack on Doha, is on his way for a friendly visit to the UK. It's shocking to hear. Like, there's something that came out about the U.S. military saying, "Oh, we didn't have any advance warning that Israel was going to bomb." Whether it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
the aid flotilla off Tunisia, which details are still coming out, whether it was the building in Doha where the diplomacy was happening. Just we can shoot missiles wherever. No one gives a fuck. We are a rogue state, but we're a rogue state that has your representatives under our thumb because of campaign
Hmm.
financing.
I mean, this is a country that has killed American citizens regularly, targets journalists. They have been taught, the Israeli government has been taught that they can act with complete impunity. And we're not going to get the pushback from the people in government at this point. It's going to have to come from everyday folks, which is why those kind of statements and showing of like how everyday people think, like what we saw in Mexico City over the weekend, are so important. The work in the flotilla is absolutely critical, and continue to support them and continue to highlight what is happening there, because it has made a difference, right? It has put these people on their back feet, and this is like, I think, getting to some of the most critical moments of this horror show. And really, this is going to take a very sustained push to try to force this rogue government that is making the world less safe, killing people all across the globe, to stop.
I saw the
You
comment
mhm.
about the death tolls. It's more than Chris Hedges. It's the Lancet, like one of the major UK medical publications, peer-reviewed journals, points to these hundreds of thousands. Of course, we know that the numbers cited by media, which are dismissed by Zionists as Hamas numbers, but are
Yeah.
actually the only ones that are certifiably documented by authorities within Palestine, which is difficult to do under the current circumstances of the past couple of years. So yeah, it's we're looking at, and you see it now. Like, I see supporters of Israel being like, "You call this a genocide? What about the millions killed in X conflict? You want to guarantee me that you're not going to hit 1 million here?" Like, I don't feel comfortable making that assurance the way the world's treating this right now, where you still have this feckless response of, "Oh, Israel should have not done that." But what can we do besides load up another pack of dollars to give to a bomb factory so they can, make more shipments?
I mean, what you can do is what we had with the conversation we had last week with Amina Sheikh and Kevin Levanchi. Two people who have organized very hard in their unions to fight back against the Canadian exportation of weapons to Israel. As Americans, we have those same kind of responsibilities. Our government gives this bloody government tremendous amounts of cover, tremendous amounts of money, and tremendous amount of material to wage this war, and not allowing politicians, not allowing corporations to get away with this, and continuing to ramp up the pressure as Israel continues its war. It's not easy, to advocate this, because it can feel like you are screaming into the void, given how much brutality we have witnessed on a regular basis. But the fact that we have started to see like the state and the government crack down on people in this country and all across the globe is because they are afraid of that collective power that we have. They are afraid of what is happening as more and more people are saying no more to this. And we owe it to ourselves, to our friends abroad, and most certainly to the Palestinian people, to not give up at this moment, because there has been just a tremendous shift in public and political opinion on this issue. And they're trying to do as much horror and damage as they can right now because they are afraid that the clock is ticking out.
Zohran's win was in part because of his
No
position
doubt.
on Israel and not in spite of it. And that is seismic. That is a a watershed moment, as they call it. Things aren't the same after that. And there's no putting this genie back in the bottle. So it is, this is, and Netanyahu understands that urgency. Uh, and it is way past time for more of the American leaders to understand that as well.
Yeah. Well, you want to talk about something that might be connected?
Yeah, don't worry. There will be Israeli connections in this story. There's this massive story out of the New York Times, which normally we're not a big fan of, but papers of record still do employ journalists, and they did a good number on this piece here. How J.P. Morgan enabled the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein. But first, let's take a little sort of dive into Trump, and something came out about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein that he had been denying completely, which is this drawing and sort of note that was given to Jeffrey Epstein on his 50th birthday. This sort of thing people had sort of drawn this already. People have pointed out that the version that had been passed around as sort of what this looks like according to someone who saw it, had a more developed figure on the woman, and given Epstein's predilections for underage girls, this is kind of gross. But anyway, it's this weird letter that Trump definitely wrote. There's Trump's denying that he wrote it and that this signature is false. No time needs to be spent on that. He absolutely made this and he absolutely signed it. You're stupid, wasting your life if you think that, there's any sort of controversy about that. These weird lines about Donald. Yes, it's hard to read. Oh, there must be more to life than having everything, says a voiceover. Trump says, yes, there is, but I won't tell you what it is. Jeffrey said, nor will I, since I also know what it is. Donald, we have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, yes, we do, come to think of it. Donald, enigmas never aged. Have you noticed that? Jeffrey, as a matter of fact, it was clear to me that last time I saw you. And then Trump finishes with, a pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday. And may every day be another wonderful secret. That is Trump threatened
I mean,
to sue the Wall
it is
Street Journal.
crazy the lies that they have been trying to push. That, like, I don't know, signature forensics over that. I mean, it is they really do think that the American people are stupid and will kind of accept any garbage that is put in front of them.
Yeah, and there's this other weird moment that happened here with Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. Let's just watch this. This is sort of like a slip that of the sight you rarely see in politics anymore. This is and he talks really fast. I'm not speeding this up. He's in Ben Shapiro mode when he lets this out.
He's not saying that what Epstein did is a hoax. It's a terrible, unspeakable evil. He believes that himself. When he first heard the rumor, he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. He was an FBI informant to try to take this stuff down. The president knows.
He was an FBI informant to try to take this stuff down. I don't know how you square that with the idea that he also stopped once he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Which is the two things he said in that 18 seconds, which is he stopped when he realized what he was, and also he worked as an FBI informant. I think it is actually probably true that Donald Trump is an FBI informant. I don't know if it's on the Epstein stuff. I think the question to ask about this is if you Google famous FBI informants and look at the class of individual that will come up.
Probably upstanding church-going folks,
Yeah, it's not pastors. It's not pastors. It's not, cafeteria ladies. It is criminals.
Yes.
It's people who get busted, and the government's like, hey, we could lock you up. For instance, I don't know what it would be with Trump.
Okay, but also sorry, Matt. If this whole story that Trump is just hanging around to be like an FBI informant is true, right? Which it is not.
Yeah, yeah.
How are we supposed to take that as the American public that Trump had all of this information about this horrific pedophile ring, and he did nothing, to stop it effectively?
Did nothing. In fact, he's working with his main co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, to sweep it under the rug
Yeah.
and get her a pardon, probably after this
Do you
move
think they
to a
could get
nice.
away with the pardon, Matt?
I think Trump does not give a fuck.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
if he loses the election, there is no chance that he is not pardoning Maxwell in the lame duck period. I would be shocked if that doesn't happen. And so let's get into this Jeffrey Epstein thing, because what's fascinating to me about this New York Times story that came out, and it is a long one. Like I was going to look up the word count on it. Huge story. It's actually the too big to fail issue coming back again. And I'll put this up for folks who haven't seen this, but this is JP Morgan Chase. This is the biggest bank in the country. JP Morgan enabled the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein. So basically, Epstein started his relationship with JP Morgan at the time in the 90s. And met a guy, Jess Staley, who apparently has some connection to some of the victims in the Epstein story. And Jess Staley is this banker who constantly vouched for Epstein, even when the compliance and counsel were saying, what are we doing here? And this is actually a pretty familiar pattern when you look at the way these banks operate. I remember like dozens of years ago, banks busted for working with drug traffickers or even like people the State Department considered terrorists. I don't want to use that word I don't want to absolve anybody that was on that list. But anyway, banks don't give a fuck. They want their money. So if you can have a guy like Jeffrey Epstein who closes big deals, and another interesting thing is you control find, and we'll do the Israel thing right now, is some rather interesting sections here. So he introduced executives to men who would become lucrative clients, like the Google co-founder Sergey Brin, and to global leaders like Prime Minister Netanyahu. This next one is for a quote by Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister of Israel, who's implicated in all this stuff too. In Epstein's lengthy analysis, alliance with JP Morgan, we found more mundane, if no less damning, explanation for Epstein's remarkable success. He was, in the words of one friend, the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, a collector of people. He used those relationships to cultivate new connections and establish his legitimacy. Now, this is the thing about espionage and spies and this sort of the deep state, but let's back it up even before, like, how we thought of it in the last few years, where it's just like, oh, this bureaucracy in the Pentagon. What was the CIA? The CIA was basically a bureaucratic formalization of connections that were made during World War II, in what was called the OSS then, of high-ranking diplomats and, frankly, rich people. The people who were they have connections. They go to the fanciest hotels. That's where they're staying all the time, which, by the way, Trump is a hotelier. And they have these conversations. So and Epstein comes up a lot in the context of Israel. And is he a Mossad agent? I don't think he's I think he's a freelancing rich guy, and intelligence agencies have known how to deal with those guys their entire that's
Yeah. I mean that's like that's how these things were set up.
Yeah, they're created to wrangle those sorts of guys in. So I don't think Epstein was a spy. And people just to mention Ghislaine Maxwell, her father was also not Mossad. He was above that. He was one of these OGs like the way uh, Bill Barr's dad was in the OSS. Like the CIA and the Mossad is beneath these guys. Like this is how elite we're talking about here, and so yeah, all of a sudden you have this guy who is making huge sort of deals. The big one in 2004, Epstein brokers JP Morgan's $1.3 billion acquisition of Highbridge Capital and got a $15 million fee from the deal. This was after 2003, which is the peak time of the partnership, where Epstein's worth $300 million. He's making $8 million in fees for JP Morgan. And he's also withdrawing hundreds of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars on a monthly basis. And that, banks know, is a red flag for criminal activity.
No, I mean,
Last
just
time, yeah, go ahead.
no, I mean, just to paint this picture as clear as possible. I mean, this is kind of like the textbook example. Like if you were trying to teach like somebody who's working in the organization, like, hey, if you start seeing somebody regularly taking out nearly $100,000 in cash, there's probably some criminal activity going on, and we should alert the government. I mean, this isn't just like, oh, doing some deep forensic investigating. We saw that like there might be an issue. It's like, hey, that's odd. People don't usually take out that much money in cash unless they are trying to bribe somebody, pay for something illicitly, or engaging in other kinds of criminal activity.
Last time I was taking out large sums of cash on a regular basis, it was because weed was illegal in New York City. Like it would have been very obvious to anybody looking at my bank statements that, oh, what's every 3 weeks this $200
withdrawal at
just walking around
45 p.m. on Friday.
It's for $5 slices of pizza,
Yeah,
Your
exactly.
Honor.
For me and
So
my
yeah,
friends. Yeah.
Epstein ultimately arrested and indicted in 2006. This is what after $1.7 million in 2004 and 2005 cash withdrawals. Just withdraw that cash. Send some of it to Eastern Europe and Russia. Bank opened accounts for young women without proper identification. Yeah, just open some accounts.
This is actually ridiculous. One of the women that they note in this piece didn't their social security number did not check out, and they still open up the bank for them anyway. I mean, what are so you're supposed to say here other than like, oh yeah, it seems like there's fraudulent activity, and we're just gonna look the other way.
And remember Wells Fargo? They were opening up accounts for people who weren't even like, frankly, downstream of a giant.
Man, if I found out you had been opening up a bunch of accounts in my name all across the country, I'd be furious. Like the idea that that's even normal activity. Oh, for this guy's just like start setting up bank accounts for his employees. Like that's not normal behavior. What the fuck are you talking about?
So Epstein was originally arrested and indicted in 2006. JP Morgan's response was to continue the relationship. 2008, he pleads guilty, becomes a registered sex offender, kept as a client after executive review. Now that executive, Jamie Dimon. We'll get back to him. 2011, compliance pushes to exit Epstein, overruled again. Who makes those decisions, I wonder? And then he's finally terminated as a client in 2013. And maintained a relationship with some JP Morgan bankers after that, despite this. But yes, so there's this one guy who it looks like they're sort of dumping on as like the main Epstein defender, this guy, Jess Staley, who shared bank info with Epstein, had visited the properties, and reportedly had a sexual encounter with an Epstein associate. You know what that means. Internal opposition, the guy named William Langford from compliance said he had no patience for this. Stephen Cutler, their general counsel, said he's not an honorable person in any way. Overruled. Now, that's where we get to our boy, Jamie Dimon, who is the leader of the bank, who is a big time, long time asshole. He's somebody saying like, look, I don't, there might be trouble with the tariffs, but we're rich, we're going to make money, so who cares, right? Like in a way, I found that a little bit interesting.
Somebody who for years they thought they were going to bring in to a position of power with either the Obama administration or maybe potentially with the Biden administration.
Yes, exactly. Very both sides playing bank. I mean, as the guy who leads the largest bank in the country, you might expect them to be, but Diamond claimed under oath in 2019, claimed under oath that he didn't recall knowing anything about Jeffrey Epstein
Mm-hmm.
until 2019. Interesting. I mean, what's your job at the bank? Jess Staley, the associate of Epstein within the bank, testified that he called Diamond to inform him about Epstein's 2006 indictment, and they met in person to discuss it. And also, internal emails noted Epstein's account closure was pending Diamond approval, and that documents were being reviewed for Jamie. Now that seems pretty clear to me. And then you tack on the fact that 2010 profile noted, quote, Diamond seemingly meddles in every detail.
Yeah. No,
I'm just gonna, yeah. As one of the lawyer representing the victims noted that whether he's lying under oath or he's kept in the dark, which I don't believe, neither's good.
So one of the things that I think is really important to understand about the story is that Epstein was not only a prolific client in the sense that like he had a lot of money in the bank. He was somebody who would come to them with deals that he was interested in organizing, right? So he was like a double catch for this organization. He's somebody who they could get significant amount of fees from, and also somebody who was willing to cut them a slice of the pie. So to sit here and act like one of your more prolific clients at a major bank like that. I mean, think about like the scale that you need to have at a bank like that to be as notable as Epstein was to these folks, and then to say after the fact, it's like, oh, I had no idea. I'm not looking into any of the activities of the bank that I've run. It's like, well, what the fucking kind of job are you doing there, friend? I mean, that is like that is an incredible revelation about your dereliction of duty, or the fact that you're lying. He had just on the crazy wire transfers alone that J.P. Morgan was running for them, they total up to over $1 billion, right? That's unique and bizarre and significant activity for any kind of a bank to be operating and running. Those are the kind of things that you pay attention to if you are
Yeah.
the chief client at a bank.
And even if there's not like straight up like whatever intel connections, these connections with rich people are enough to explain away why this guy's protected, frankly, why he's
Hmm.
protected for so long. Like I said and it was mentioned up top in the interview, introduced Google co-founder to this bank. He connected, here's this, actually let me put this section here. So they go into when they decided not to dismiss Epstein. It was another blown opportunity. It showed, despite the bank's later attempts to pin blame on Staley, responsibility for Epstein was shared across the institution. Executives like Cutler and Langford, while united in believing that he was a threat to the bank's reputation, didn't take a stand. Elsewhere in the bank, the combination of a thirst for profits and Epstein's knack for making himself seem indispensable proved potent and hard to kick, the financial equivalent of a powerful narcotic. And this again, this is, I think, kind of enough. Sure enough, just as more bank employees were losing patience with Epstein in 2011, he began dangling more goodies. That March, to the pleasant surprise of JP Morgan's investment bankers in Israel, they were granted an audience with Netanyahu. The bankers informed Staley, who forwarded their email to Epstein with one-word message, "Thanks." The bank spokesman said JP Morgan neither needed nor sought Epstein's help for meetings with any government leaders. I mean, it's nice of you to say that. I don't think the New York Times, given their track record over particularly the past 2 years, is in a hurry to make implications about Israel that are unwarranted to make. Like, I think those would have been edited out if it was so meaningless that he was some kind of intermediary. Also, let me see if I can find this. Oh, there's another one. Yeah, next. Then this one involved Bill Gates, who had recently entered Epstein's orbit in an apparent effort to ingratiate and further entangle himself with his bankers and the Microsoft co-founder. Epstein pitched Erdos and Staley on creating an enormous investment and charitable fund with something like $100 billion in assets. The so-called donor-advised fund. Oh, let me put this up. Would be seated. The so-called donor-advised fund would be seeded with billions from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. More would come from J.P. Morgan clients. Like, you're going to put that guy away and not expect that there's going to be some funny business corrupting your justice system to try to keep him free when he has connections like that, like when a
Yeah.
former Israeli prime minister's calling him a collector of people.
No, I mean, and this is somebody who's like heavily implicated, when people were trying to push back. Because the thing I want to make abundantly clear to people who haven't read the piece, and you really should, because it's a tremendous piece of journalism here, is that throughout this entire process, there are people throughout the organization of JP Morgan saying, hey, there's something funny going on with this Epstein guy. Or, I mean, when he was being prosecuted for his sexual assault in Florida, people were like, hey, I don't know if we want to be associated with this fellow. I believe Epstein said at the time, Bill Gates quote, go talk to Bill Gates about me. Um, this is somebody who was regularly in trouble and was having high up people in positions of authority and power, either in this case, acting potentially as a character witness for him, or just in the organization of JP Morgan itself, shielding him from any kind of scrutiny because people were regularly bringing up and flagging the activities of Epstein. Those flags were just being quashed by people in positions of authority and power in the organization. It's because you can take it many different ways, right? About like, oh, there's a big conspiracy. He's like an intelligence asset, all this kind of stuff. But there's also a really simple version of this: is that having him as a client was exceptionally profitable for the organization, and it was also exceptionally profitable in a perverse and disgusting way for certain individuals who are very much implicated in the odious and disgusting acts of Epstein's pedophile and prostitution ring.
It is September 9th right now. On August 26th, right before Trump sort of disappeared over the weekend and everyone was sort of wish casting that he was dead, a senior White House official tells NBC News that Bill Gates was in the West Wing today for a scheduled meeting
That's
with
cool, bro.
President Trump.
He was there to
No
testify about the character of Jeffrey Epstein.
No word on what the two men discussed. Oh, a spokesman says, yeah, it was Jeff. No, a spokesman said, Bill met with the president to discuss the importance of U.S. global health programs and health research that is necessary to save lives, protect Americans' health, and preserve U.S. leadership in the world. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the people testifying about Bill Gates' friend, Jeffrey Epstein,
No.
the prolific sex trafficking pedophile. I'm sure it had nothing. I'm sure that probably didn't even come. They probably, we could have I should have asked them about that. It's like when you're out with your boys and you come back and someone's like, hey, what's going on with his relationship status? Did you ask him about that? And you're like, no, I didn't ask. We were just too busy enjoying college football. That's the way Trump and Bill Gates talk about world health. Who has time for any of the petty stuff about our mutual deceased pedophile friend?
Yeah, and I think that it's important to note that like there's been a lot of focus on the government angle, obviously because of Trump and the kind of political connections between people like Trump, people like Bill Clinton, to this monster. But as this reporting shows, it's like it also implicates like our financial system and some of the wealthiest people on the planet.
That's the thing with the Alex Acosta saying he belongs to intelligence back when he was AG of Florida, where he reportedly said he was told he belongs to intelligence, let him go. I think there's some case where that's just blatantly true. Like the guy has Israeli prime ministers, on speed dial.
Yeah.
I also think that's saying national security or intelligence is an easy way for doing what you want to do for rich people. And then saying actually it's for, so like the degree to which that was about protecting some sort of spy relationship between the US and Mossad, or it's just about this guy knew a whole bunch of rich people, including Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. Like, yeah, we're not going to push him. We protect people like that. Like, it was almost shocking that he got fucking arrested in the first place.
No, totally. Especially with Donald Trump working so hard as an FBI informant.
It was the toughest job.
he was just in there to help, right? He was. It's really when it comes to an excuse, I think probably one of the worst ones, right?
Who's the most innocent person to ever be an FBI informant? Like, let me try. I'll try. That's a good one for Google AI. Most innocent FBI informant ever. Like, the only way you get entangled in that is crimes.
Yeah,
you don't. The FBI isn't like that person is so trustworthy that we
Mhm.
need to get them to do some undercover work for us.
Yeah, it's something else. Well, friends, we got a lot to get to today. In just a second, we're going to go and talk about Iran and the Women Life Freedom movement. I want to remind folks that we also are going to be looking at this new character, James Tallarico. We've covered him actually a shitload on this program. You can go watch some of our previous videos on that. But he is now, as most of us knew, running for Senate. We'll talk a little bit about that and what that means. And we got a visit from Dave Packman coming up and much, much more in the post game. You get access to that patreon.com/leftreckoning.
The breakup is
What are you
here.
seeing, Matt?
The breakup is here. Well, I was just seeing the AI response to.
Oh, sorry.
I
didn't mean
apologize
to-
for doing this, but there are no publicly known most innocent FBI informants, as the use of informants is a highly secretive and controversial area. Many individuals who become informants do so to avoid criminal charges and are often involved in illegal activity themselves. So yeah, that's as once again AI provides the median sort of replacement level response on something.
There you go. Well, folks, we got much, much more coming. Stick around. Let's jump over this conversation, Matt, with Nilo. It was really, really wonderful reading this book. I highly suggest people check it out. There's a link below for all of that. But enjoy, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, Left Reckoners. I'm really excited to be having this conversation on the program today. We are joined by Nilo Tabrizy, who is one of the co-authors of this excellent new book, For the Sun After Long Nights. And we're going to be talking about Iran, about the women's rights protests recently, and also about how that country is kind of treated in the media in this country, and many, many more things. But Nilo, thank you so much for joining me on the program. It means a lot to us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, there's a lot to get into here. And one of the things that I wanted to maybe get into to start us off is when I was reading through the book, obviously we're thinking about the Women Life Freedom movement. And I was thinking a lot about how obviously that those protests were very much about women's rights and women in Iran. But I was also thinking about 2009 and the Green Movement, and how after the killing of Neda Aga Sultan, women became very much like a symbol of the kind of protest movement. And I wanted to talk to you sort of why you think in Iran, women are not only just like a symbol, but actually like such an important force in politics in the fight for reform, and just sort of connecting, this major role that the women have played. Because I think a lot of people in the US and in Canada, they have a certain view of what Iranian women are like. And I think it would be interesting to hear about your thoughts on the connection between these massive protests that we've seen in the past, 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a sociologist I spoke with once said that, it's the most oppressed members of society that often will stand up and fight and, speak about the rights that are being taken from them. And so Iranian women are at the forefront, not just because, specifically things like gender apartheid specifically affect Iranian women, or as well with the mandatory hijab. It's just women out in the streets wearing hijab. That's a very clear visual cue that the Islamic Republic is in power, right? But Iranian women have been fighting for change. This is a legacy of over a century of activism in Iran. We look back to the constitutional revolution at the turn of the 20th century, and as the first modern, national uprising happened in what was then Persia, women were there as well. So kind of we've always been in the mix. Women have always fought for their rights, have had, publications about women's rights in Iran. So this is an incredibly deep history in our country.
No, I mean, I think it's just an important thing to note. And I think
It's something that is very like visceral when you see these kind of mass movements, because it is a country that has a very limited, I don't know, freedom of political expression, but the bravery of folks to regularly stand up, and I think women in particular, end up being a very, very powerful symbol, just because by acting or dressing a certain way, you can be in protest to the government.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember when I was seeing the videos from 2022 come online, there was a couple of things that really showed to me that women were at the front lines. One, this was the first time that we're seeing women directly putting their body in front of security forces. So there was a video I was looking to verify with an elderly grandmother right up in a security officer's face, waving her finger at him. Like, that shows incredible bravery. And then just at the other end of the spectrum, there's a video of these young elementary school girls. Like, they couldn't have been older than 9 or 10. They were really small. And they had a member of the Basij, which is part of the IRGC in Iran. Basij came to speak at the school about importance of wearing hijab. And in the middle of his speech, these young Iranian girls were screaming "Bisharaf" at him, which is like a pretty intense slur that translates to without shame, without honor, shameless. But to see these young girls coming in direct confrontation again with the state at their own school is pretty remarkable. And then when their school administrator is trying to kind of calm them down, like, they're throwing paper at him, trash at him. Like, it's amazing to see, this was a Gen Z led movement, absolutely, but you can see it among, all different ages of women standing up to the state in that time.
No, I mean, a lot of the stories that y'all document in the book, I think really highlight this. And without getting too far into our conversation about this, let's talk about the book a little bit. I mean, you wrote this, you co-authored this book. Could you talk about how it came to be, and why you decided to have two people writing it?
Yeah, so I co-wrote this book with my friend Fatima Jamalpour. She's a journalist who is based in Iran all throughout the protests. She had to leave Iran coming to the 1-year anniversary of Mahsa Amini's death, but she was there for the whole experience. And so her and I have always naturally had a working relationship. I met her when I was at the New York Times, when she was in town doing a fellowship at the UN. And I met her and we really clicked. Like, we just clicked on the way that we love Iran, our passion of journalism, our life paths. Like, there was just something unspoken between us that really knitted us close together. And so for years we kept in touch. When I was at the Times, I tried to get her accredited to work for the New York Times while she was in Iran, but they just weren't giving accreditation out to media companies. And so we started to write partly anonymously. So first we wrote in 2019, 2020 for N+1, and we wrote a partially anonymous essay together. We did that again for the Paris Review. And it seemed like we got such a great response from this work that it really seemed to me like these two perspectives are really needed to fully see Iran. And so we conceived of the book as two Iranian women journalists telling the story of the Women Life Freedom Uprising, one from inside the country, one from outside of the country, and our personal narrative. So we come from different parts of the country, different ethnic groups. We have different experiences as well. And so kind of to understand Iran, it's necessary to stitch our perspectives together, because I think it hits with so many different people who have left or stayed. And even if you're not Iranian, what that means. So yeah, it actually was a very natural process for both of us.
I want to get into some of the timeline of the protest movement and all that, but on the personal side, I mean, I can't imagine the experience of doing this reporting was easy by any sense of the imagination. And on your side, I mean, I'll just, as my audience knows, like I have Iranian American family, and the most recent bombing campaign, there's those moments when you try to call somebody and they don't pick up, or you don't hear from somebody for a while. And, whenever there's silence, there's always a lot of fear. And I can only imagine that was happening regularly in your reporting. I mean, could you talk a little bit about the personal experience of, relying and communicating with somebody who you care about, and those moments of not really knowing what's going on?
Yeah. So for me, I always wanted to be a journalist. Like, there's photos of me when I used to wear a tape recorder as a purse as a child, which is quite, like, honestly so annoying to my whole family. But I'm in an office. So I've always wanted to be a reporter, but I never wanted to report on Iran because I'm not from a political family. My family immigrated to Canada in the 90s. And so I was really lucky. I got to spend summers in Iran. I got to meet my extended family. And then when I moved to New York to go to journalism school and to work here, that's the first time I started meeting Iranian Americans who said, oh, my grandfather was an oil minister, or my family was connected to this political party. And they, either were born in the US, had never been back, or hadn't been back for years. And so my, privilege and experience in being able to go back to Iran, that's something I guarded even more tightly then. But then when I was working at the New York Times in Trump's first term and the travel ban was happening, I looked around and I saw that I was, the only Iranian reporter in the New York newsroom. And I felt like it was really important to try to contribute things to the report. But I was very careful because I was still, I was still scared of closing the door to Iran. So I connected with my journalist friends in Iran and I asked them, okay, what's your red line? When you publish this, what gets you in trouble? So I kind of was in line with some of my reporter friends because they didn't want to, I think a lot of us are in fear of that, of that door being closed. So I reported on Iran that way. And then I stopped reporting on Iran for a little bit and I got back to it with the Women Life Freedom protests. But yeah, it's really difficult to report on the community that I'm from. Because there's also in the type of work that I do, open source reporting, a lot of that is looking at graphic imagery. So visuals of protests can be quite violent. And we always talk about the concept of mental hygiene in our work. So if you're looking at really graphic imagery, making sure that you step away from it and taking breaks. But with Iran, it really, really slows my brain down. So I remember, in this last incident with the Israeli airstrikes in Iran, my brain felt like it was stalling. I just couldn't move fast. And I kept trying to understand why. And my therapist said, well, you're not experiencing vicarious trauma. You're from the community. It's a different experience to see apartments that I've been to or streets that I've been on, hit with airstrikes. And so that's just my brain really slowed down. So it's really difficult to do that work. And then, to have internet connectivity issues, to not be able to reach out to my family and friends in Tehran. And then another layer on that is while I do this work, and when I'm actively reporting on Iran, I don't get in touch with my family members because I don't want to open them up to any type of harassment from the state based on me. So it's a lot of difficult things to hold.
No, I mean, I'm certain. And, maybe to kind of paint the picture, most of our audience, I think, is familiar with the protests and what they were about. But if you could briefly outline that and then, kind of take us through that first year or so of the major events, because I think in the U.S. there was a lot of the imagery was so visceral, right? And people were kind of interacting with that. But I think there is a lot of kind of not misunderstanding is the wrong word, but I think a lot of people didn't look in too deep other than there are protests in Iran. And that was kind of the headline.
Yes. So the protest started over Mahsa Jina Amini, who is a young Kurdish woman visiting Tehran, and she was killed in the custody of the morality police. And so going through different threads of early reporting from that time, she was apparently stopped by the morality police for improper wearing of hijab. And then she was killed in their custody. The next image that we saw of her was when she was in a hospital, unconscious, with tubes coming out of her face, dried blood on her ears, just super graphic imagery of her after being beaten. And then after that, kind of as those images started to get published, that image that I'm describing, that's what really incensed Iranian people, to see a young woman lying there unconscious, after an interaction with the morality police. And so people really spilled out into the streets immediately. There were protests at the hospital she was at. Gina succumbed to her injuries a few days after. So she was killed in custody of the morality police. And yeah, that just incensed a whole population. And I think part of that is so many of us can see ourselves in Gina. These interactions with the police can go haywire really quickly. The law is absolutely on their side, so we can see ourselves in her. And then, men have sisters or moms or friends that they can see, so it's this experience that we see that women can be disposed of so cruelly and in such a casual nature by the Islamic Republic. So this is an experience that maybe was a few connections away, and then it spread once these images really were published online.
I wanted to get a little bit of context here. Can you talk a little bit, because I think it's really important that Mahsa was coming was it from Tehran, right? And could you talk about the kind of like social differences in different parts of the country when it comes to wearing hijab, right? Because from my understanding, it was one of those things where like, there are different customs. It's a little bit more watched in places like Tehran. But could you talk a little bit about those differences?
Yeah, so she was, so Gina's a Kurdish woman. She was coming to visit Tehran. We don't have any images from when she was detained, so we'll never know if she was wearing improper hijab, if she was not. Was she not wearing hijab because, many women in Kurdistan do not wear hijab? Was she harassed because she looked like she stood out? Like, these are questions that we don't have answers for. I mean, even in Tehran prior to the protests, like many women would wear their hijab like here, or, it's very chic to kind of wrap it around your shoulders. And kind of the question that every woman asks each other in Iran is like, if you're meeting at a cafe or something, we'll really casually ask each other like, Kesi gir dad, like, did anyone bug you or get in your way? And that's asking if you've been harassed by the morality police essentially on your way. Yeah, so I mean, we'll never really know, but that's some of the context of hijab in Tehran. And
I mean, just like because you could just imagine without knowing, we will never know the full context of that. It's like going into traveling in the U.S. even, like there are just kind of different customs and ways to interact with people. You treat people a little bit differently in New York than you do in the South, for example. These kind of things, it creates this kind of haze about what is and what isn't going to be enforced. And then obviously in this case, how extremely violent and brutal it was enforced.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll never know the full story, but I mean, the image of her in the hospital speaks for itself. I mean, she was beaten unconscious. And I think, again, people seeing her like that, like it enraged a population of people both inside and outside of Iran.
So let's talk about a little bit of the protest timeline afterwards. I mean, there were obviously these massive protests. How long did the kind of large scale movements last? And especially that first year.
Yeah, it was pretty quick. I mean, if my memory serves me, it was probably within days that the protests had started, because she, as I said, there were, as information was spread that she was beaten, she was at Kasra Hospital in Tehran, crowds started to form. And so the protests really did take off. And the things that I paid attention to in the first days, but what protest chants were we hearing? And so first we heard Zan Zendegi Azadi, which comes from the Kurdish Jinjian Azadi, woman, life, freedom. And almost immediately the protests were anti-government. So if we look at the 2019 protests in Iran, for example, these were protests that started over a fuel increase that people came out into the streets for. And then a few days in, I think I maybe want to say 4 days in, I heard the chants start to become anti-government. But right away, these chants were like down with the regime, Makbar dictator, death of the dictator, all of those things. Like that runway was very quick with Gina's death. And the protests took hold. I mean, I remember street protests all the way up until December in most of Iran, because once the protests started, the government wasn't anticipating them. So streets were taken over in Tehran. It's the largest and most wide scale protests in the Islamic Republic's history. So all over the country, we were seeing them in Qom and Mashhad, that are both, quite religious cities that are often pro-regime. We saw them in Kish Island. We saw them in Kurdistan in Iran, in Sistan Balochistan, the Baloch province, just all over. But then around end of December, the government changed its tactics. So from responding with deadly force to protesters or shooting them in the eye or, things like that, there started to be mass arrests and mass detentions. And what really did chill the movement in terms of chilling people coming out into the streets was the execution of 2 young protesters. And that, I mean, I remember talking to my friends who were protesting at that time, or sources, they were terrified to go out after 2 young protesters were executed.
Yeah. I mean, so what were the kind of long-term effects of that? Because one of the things that, just talking to folks that I know, is that like you still see, folks sometimes walking around maybe with, their hijabs kind of, just covering their hair a little bit and things like that. So obviously this violence really, really, stalled a lot of activity. But I mean, what was the reaction to that in the weeks and months after?
So women are still, I mean, even today, women are still in Tehran without hijab. And that's a form of activism every day. The laws surrounding mandatory hijab haven't changed. In fact, they tried to enact a new law about a year after the protests to give even higher penalties for people who did not wear mandatory hijab. But women are still walking around without it. They may still be detained and harassed, but it is kind of incredible to see that. I mean, I just saw the New York Times was in Iran and they interviewed a woman who was not wearing hijab. And it wasn't about hijab, but she was talking about the Israeli airstrikes, how she wanted diplomacy, and to kind of see this woman in full force like that. And obviously she would know the consequences of appearing on camera or to Western media without hijab. Like, it just shows the bravery and really the success of the movement.
Can we talk about, I mean, so there were these deaths, but there were also, arrests and things of that nature. I mean, could we talk about that kind of state repression against the protesters as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There were mass arrests among protesters, and that also really spooked people from being out in the streets, especially after you saw mass arrests, mass detentions, arrests, and then 2 protesters being executed. That was really scary. We saw the state also misuse ambulances. So there were things that I heard from protesters that said that we were protesting, an ambulance would come up, it would open, and all of a sudden a bunch of plainclothes officers would come out and try to beat, detain, and harass us. So even using that to detain protesters, and as well then throwing protesters in an ambulance and taking them to a police station. So we saw that as well. And one protester I spoke with said, we used to be terrified when we saw police or Basij in these protests. And now when we're hearing ambulances, it's a whole new level of fear that we have. Like, are they going to help us or are they going to beat and detain us? So kind of seeing multiple levels of state repression, arrests, ambulances, Revolutionary Guard as well was at some protests as well. So yeah, really just seeing kind of the whole state system working against its own people.
So, I mean, let's talk a little bit about the effects, because, I mean, a lot has happened in the past few years, obviously. And, as you said, harsher laws have been passed. There's a new president. Obviously, the United States has bombed Iran recently. But as we were noting, like, you still do see people, pushing back against, the mandatory hijab. So, I mean, in your kind of reading and telling, what have the effects been? Is it something that is just kind of existing, almost latent and ready to erupt again? Have these kind of victories sort of, I mean, there's no doubt about it that this has kind of forever changed, social life in the country. But I mean, where would you put, how would you categorize the movement today?
I think every time that we see a woman in Tehran or in Iran not wearing hijab, that's a visible symbol of the movement in action. Mm-hmm. So if we look at the movement by saying, well, it didn't topple the Islamic Republic, therefore it's failed, I don't think that's necessarily a fair way to judge the movement, because this type of, right? I mean, yeah, with such a, I mean, yeah, of course, it has like so much surveillance, things like that. But every time we see a woman walking out without hijab, that's an example that the movement continues and that women continue to resist. As well, if we look at the hijab and chastity law. So this was passed about a year after the protests. It was overwhelmingly passed by parliament. And it's this incredibly draconian law. It was saying we're going to use AI, maybe traffic cameras, to try to catch people not wearing hijab. It would really increase the fines and sentences for not wearing Islamic dress. And it also encourage kind of vigilante behavior, saying that, you should essentially tell on each other if they're not adhering to the dress code. So this was passed, but it didn't go into effect. And part of that is because of the public outcry. And the president himself, never signed it into, never enacted it. The eve that it was supposed to come out, there was this Iranian singer named Parastu, and she did this incredible performance where she's in this, her hair's out, she's in this long black dress. She defied the Islamic Republic's ban on women singing. And she said, this is how I choose to resist in the most peaceful way possible. And so on the eve of this law coming out, this woman takes this incredible stand, sings live. And of course, members of her band and herself are detained afterwards and harassed. But even just seeing that, that's a visible symbol that, this resistance continues.
So I wanted to sort of ask, about your timeline as you're reporting on this. When did this idea for the book come out, and also what was the thought process about the way that you wrote it and put it together? Because again, it's not just like a kind of linear, like here's the first day and here's and catches up to today. You're weaving your life into it. Your co-authors weaving their life into it. What was the kind of timeline of when you were thinking, okay, we need to turn this into a book, and also the specific way that you wrote it?
Yeah. So Fatima and I got back in touch in September, as I was reporting on different stories. I hadn't heard from her for about a year because she messaged me one day and said, I have to go back to Iran. My father has cancer. I know I'm probably going to be detained or arrested, but if you don't hear from me, that means I'm safe. And that's the last I heard from her. And it was extremely gutting to get that message. And in the time that followed, I reached out to mutual friends. I never got any news from her. And that was it. And I it was really, really difficult. And then she messaged me again in that time and let me know that she was fine, that actually in the past year she had been interrogated because when she was abroad, she worked for BBC Persian, which, the Islamic Republic does not like. So when she got back and got in touch with me, we just started chatting again. And I said to her, maybe this is crazy, but do you want to write again? And so we wrote that essay for the Paris Review, and it felt really nice because, it's still reporting and journalism, but it was so different than what I was doing at the times. Like it was just like a space to express in a narrative way about the protests in Iran. And then after that essay came out, I was working on something else about Persian poetry. And then my book agent got in touch, said that she liked the Paris Review essay, and what are we thinking next? And I said, I don't want to write about poetry. It doesn't feel right with, people in my country being killed. I have this vague idea about this essay. Like Fatima and I wrote this partially anonymously, but what if we did something from here? And so then I just kind of free wrote some pages to my agent, sent it, and then let Fatima know. And it started organically from there again.
I mean, I find it was a really great choice, and it's very compelling. And again, I wanted to talk a little bit about, if it's okay to talk a little bit personally. One of the things that was very moving for me about reading, your narrative is the very difficult decision to decide to report on Iran, knowing that probably means that you would not be able to return, but also, I don't want to put any words in your mouth, so I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question. But there is a sense of having your feet in one place and your head in another constantly. I found that to be very, very moving. Just that sense of you might be knowing these things are happening in Iran and you're consumed with them, hurt by them, but then you're just kind of walking around in your life in the States and in New York, right? I mean, could you talk a little bit about that experience as a journalist and as a writer and just as a person?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like immigrating to Canada was the best choice I never made for myself. But no matter how you come, and I came in the most privileged way to Canada. Someone told my dad, you should apply for a visa because you studied in the UK and you speak English. It was such a random series of accidents that we ended up in Canada. And it was such an easy circumstance. And yet still that experience was difficult for me. Coming in now Vancouver, it is extremely Iranian. There's Persian stores I can go. It's a great place to go for me and to not speak English and just speak Farsi and feel really at home in a different way. But then that was not the experience. I was the only Iranian person in my school, probably until high school. And then the new Iranians that came, I was like, friends. They were like, no, you're Western. I was like, oh, stumped again. What do I do? It's a very interesting experience to be dug up and put here, and kind of figuring out so cheesy. Who am I? Where am I? But it's a trauma. Yeah. It's a trauma no matter how easy the migration route was. And that's something I really had to understand. But yeah, I mean, it's I'm very Western and I'm very Iranian. My friends come over, my, non-Iranian friends, I have a little tea and I have a tray and I'm serving them tea and they're like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm living my life, so it's a very, just kind of living these multiple experiences at once. both confusing and also exciting. And I think the nice part of it that I didn't really understand, because I like every time I publish a story about Iran, like it's grief. It's a confirmation like you can't return. And so it doesn't feel nice to be reminded of that, but not being able to be there. It's a different conception for me of like, how can I be an active Iranian citizen, a dual citizen from abroad? Like what can I do? How do I conceive of my country? All these things, like actually not being able to go there has forced me to connect in different ways.
Yeah, I'll tell you, we have a lot of really great Iranian guests on this program, and it really breaks my heart that almost every conversation is one about grief and sadness. And it's difficult because, Iranian people and Iranian culture there's so much joy and love and depth in it that like to have it be experienced by so many people as like, oh, this is a country that like the U.S. has tensions with, or there's war and there's protests, is very, very, very difficult. I wanted to, before we let you go, I have two more questions I wanted to ask you. One was specifically as a journalist, your process on both your reporting that you did with the Times and also in this book. There's a lot of misinformation that happens in these kind of protest movements, and sometimes it's even sympathetic, right? It's not always just like somebody cynical. But I remember when these protests first started, for example, like people are sharing videos from some other protest in another country, even years. So when you're sitting and doing this kind of reporting, how do you work and make sure that you're vetting everything, and also there is a pressure to try to get the story out and be the first one to break it, but also making sure that you're not contributing to, spreading, misinformation or more confusion.
Yeah, I'm totally okay not being first as long as I'm correct with things that I publish. So anytime, I had some friends of mine the first days of the protests, like, over the weekend, and they asked me why I wasn't reposting videos. And I said, well, I haven't verified those. And there's a process in terms of checking videos, right? Like, as you said, sometimes people often don't nefariously share misinformation unless they are doing disinformation. They're trying to assuage you a different way. But I mean, there's things we can do. You can check the key frames in the video and Google search them and make sure it's of the current moment. You can speak with people that were there. So all these different things we're doing in terms of making sure that these visuals are accurate. It's time consuming, but it's really the only way to do the reporting correctly.
No, I think it is really important. And yeah, you see a lot of people who I think, their heart's in the right place, but it's just, it's not good to spread misinformation. And also, even if you want something to happen, let's say.
I mean, I remember I saw a video in the beginning of the protests and someone said, oh, they took over an IRGC base. And I said, they did. And so I looked at the video, it looked very residential, and it didn't look like a military base or anything to me. And then I read it, because part of verifying a video is you look for clues that you can see. So if something is filmed super tight, like there's nothing else for me to pull. But this one, I could see shop signs. In the background, I saw Sepa Bank. And I thought, oh, Sepa is what you call IRGC in Persian. I thought that's probably where that came from, is someone saw Sepa and they tweeted it and it kind of ran from there. So like even small details like that are really important, and can, then when you look back, you're like, okay, I can see where this, perhaps started.
Mm-hmm. And then also, I mean, this is a kind of a big kind of moral and political tension, is that, covering these things and it's difficult because in the U.S., I'll say what I think. There are some folks who might have associations with organizations like the MEK. There's people like John Bolton who on the right in the U.S. Who want to use these kind of protests to justify doing horrible things to Iranians, meaning invading and waging war. And I'm just which has led some people on the left, I think, unfortunately, to take bad positions on this protest movement, because they're like, oh, this is being used to justify an American invasion about this, which robs people of their agency. It denies the reality of what people are going through. I'm just curious, your perspective, on this, because sometimes these things are used, I think, by kind of right-wing figures, people who would like to see more conflict and war, to use these things, these horrible stories, to justify more horrors.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is to listen to people that are in these videos that you're seeing shared. If they are calling for if they are calling for diplomacy with the regime, with the Islamic Republic, okay. If they're calling for the system to come down, okay. It's just really about centering the people that are risking their lives to upload this online and to share, their perspectives. Like, it's just important to keep that there. And if there are competing motivations from, maybe disingenuous actors outside of Iran, like, there's nothing we can do about that. And I think we can continue to just look at the reality, just to center the people again and try to, as much as we can, just platform the voices of Iranians who are risking everything, to share their experiences.
Well, then, in closing, I mean, you've written this book about this. You've been writing, thinking, and living in certain ways this for a few years now. What is something that you would like people, when they're kind of reading your book or just thinking about these protest movements, to try to take away?
Yeah, I think to take away the risk that Iranians are taking. So, doing journalism in Iran is so difficult. We haven't had a correspondent in Tehran since my colleague Jason Rezaian was arrested, and in solitary and in Evin. And so when you're doing journalism there is limited. Doing accountability journalism is very difficult. There are amazing reporters in Iran who do it, like Niloufar Hamidi, who you write about in the book. She's, still producing incredible journalism right now. But it comes at such a cost. And so, it's very difficult to do it there. And so all we're left with as reporters from the outside is what people are uploading. And they know the risks. Iranians know the risks of putting something on Telegram, on Instagram, on Twitter, everything, like how that puts a target on their back. So when you're reading this, to keep in mind, all these pieces of evidence that I've been able to gather has been because of the risk and the bravery of Iranians. So it's just like really being precious with what they're sharing and, trying to keep the integrity surrounding that.
Well, Nilo, thank you so much for joining us. The book, we'll have a link below for everybody, for The Sun, After Long Nights. Really, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me.
Yes, friends. That was really nice. And just for folks' sake, there's links below to follow all that. I will spell out I will spell out her name real quick: Nilotabrizy. So you can follow her work, pick up the book, and all of that. It was really nice. I'm really happy.
Yeah, very nice conversation. It's nice perk of this job to be able to talk with people doing actual journalism on this sort of stuff, and yeah, fascinating perspective.
Yeah. So, folks, we got a hell of a lot coming. We're going to be jumping over the post game in just a little bit. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning. Remember, we keep it one straight stream. So you want no ads, you don't want any interruptions, you can jump over there, Patreon.com/Left Reckoning, and get it. We got a little teaser we'll play in a second. We'll be talking about a very special boy who's gotten some very nice money recently, and he's pretty upset about being called out over that. And we'll be playing some Zohran and much, much more. Before we get there, unless you had something to add, Matt.
Nope, Kristen Gillibrand will be there too.
Our girl. I did want to talk a little bit about Texas and the addition of James Talarico to the Senate race here. For people who are longtime listeners of this program, we've covered James Talarico a good bit, particularly because of his regular presence pushing back against some of the worst Republican freak laws in the Texas legislature. James Talarico is a Texas rep, and he has decided that he's going to run for Senate. We've had some kind of questions and criticisms before as well, but maybe without me putting too much, front loading it too much. Why don't we let him introduce himself in the way that he chose to? This is the launch video that came out earlier today. And we're going to play a couple of minutes of this, but we're going to have to turn it off after a little while because they ding us for all of these politician videos on YouTube, which is pretty annoying. But that's why we'll be doing that.
The biggest divide in our country is not left versus right. It's top versus bottom. Billionaires want us looking left and right at each other so that we're not looking up at them. The people at the top work so hard to keep us angry and divided because our unity is a threat to their wealth and their power. So their social media algorithms and their cable news networks tear us apart. They divide us by party, by race, by gender, by religion, so that we don't notice that they're defunding our schools, gutting our healthcare, and cutting taxes.
All right, we'll have to stop it there. People probably seen it. Matt, I mean, I'm curious your first thoughts there. I will say up at the top, it's very nice to hear somebody talking about the billionaires in American politics. Not that James Talarico is the first one, but you know, that's been a decision that he's made over the past year and a half, really, to kind of use that line. He has another line that he uses, like the only minority threatening everyday people. This is me paraphrasing it, is the billionaires. So yeah, I'm curious your thoughts there, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been fairly impressed by Talarico as a messenger. I think the first time I ever noticed him, he very concisely outlined how charter schools are a subsidy for rich parents at the expense of everyone else's public schooling. He's a politician. You know, there's some real politic of, say, maybe going easy on crypto or whatever that I'm less excited about. But in terms of messaging, he's a politician that also wants to be successful. And there you can't be successful unless you are pointing out the actual problems that people are facing. And this whole thing about, like, it's not left or right, it's top versus bottom, that is a smart way to look at that. Like, that is the best way to look at that. That is what I would prescribe if I had a political consultancy. I would be saying exactly do that. And because that's reality. That's the reality we're facing right now. And, you know, what it's interesting, it's not so surprising to me that somebody who is able to say that stuff without it getting caught in his throat because he's taking donor money on a certain issue, you know, it's not a surprise to me that he resonates with people.
Yeah, we'll get to the donor stuff in just a second. I'll agree with you. I mean, I think that as a message is something that you know, shows somebody seeing some of the failures of the Democratic Party, let's say, particularly in this last year in the 2024 election. Again, you know, James, I think, has been able to really speak with conviction and well against the charter schools, against, you know, absurdities like putting the 10 Commandments in schools across the state. You know, and he is somebody who talks about, you know, his faith a lot. And I also think that that's something that in a real way can be beneficial for people on the left and Democrats to be able to engage in. So we'll watch. And look, there's just no doubt about it, by the way. Talarico is like 100 times better than Allred, who has just been an empty suit the whole way through. I'm saying all that because I'm about to also say some other things. You want to say something before I do that, Matt?
I just want to say the funny thing to me here is how much this is a reflection of the need for politicians to be commodified for donors. And I'm not saying that with Talarico in particular. I think he's getting, like, I think he could attract smaller donations given, you know, his type of populism. But it is the case that he's sort of in the church lane. And we also have the football player lane. And there's also a third guy who's a astronaut. All we need is a vet. And we have the entirety of, like, the sort of identities that are ready to be put
The
forward.
real move, Matt, will be when they combine them all. Get a vet.
Into one. Yeah, exactly. It's yeah, the guy from
Actually, I wouldn't be
Herschel
surprised
Walker.
if Verts, I believe, the astronaut, they might have some military background. That's not atypical
That makes
for
sense.
astronauts, but I'm not certain about that one way or the other. No, I know, and I mean, this is one of the things that, like, so and this isn't specific. I mean, this is specific to Talarico, but this is just a point that I make about politics in general in Texas. As everyone knows, like, my book's coming out very soon on the subject. You know, for a long time, there's been this kind of like, well, if we get this box ticked, we get that box ticked, then we'll win, right? The Colin Allred move was kind of cynical in a way, right? It's like, oh, in Texas, people love football, so they're going to vote for the football player if you put him out there. You know, no one gave a shit. I mean, Ted Cruz completely stole Colin Allred's thunder on that because Colin Allred was not and is not an inspiring candidate. It's very hard to get him on the record about what he believes and what he doesn't believe. He was somebody who signed a letter with the Republicans accusing Joe Biden of pursuing, quote, open borders policies, right? So this isn't even somebody who's like loyal to like the Democratic Party brand and line, right? So already, Matt, you muted yourself.
Just gonna say he ran as a Justice Democrat.
Who?
Colin.
Oh, yeah. That's very funny. Yeah. I mean, look. So anyways, on the all right question, we all kind of know what we think about there. When it comes to James Talarico has become very, very viral because of his opposition to the Republican Party, right? Which is a good thing to be in opposition to, especially in the state of Texas, as they are doing horrific things that are going to have consequences that will last for a lifetime, like the defunding of our schools to subsidize parents who want to send their kids to private school, right? The attacks on our education system in general, the failures of the state government to provide an adequate standard of living for everyday Texans as the state government continues to try to entice wealthy people to move to the state, big businesses to move to the state. It's embarrassing that Texas leads the country in uninsured rates. It's embarrassing that Texas leads the country in an even more disgusting statistic, uninsured children, right? So there's a lot to oppose in the Republican Party. I would like to see some more substance from James Talarico, right? We've seen a lot of his ability to speak about these things. We've seen a lot of his ability to kind of, say like, hey, I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, I'm going to talk, about the Bible in a way that might, surprise you. Or push back against some of the arguments I'm hearing from the right when they say that this is a biblical value. I'm going to argue that it's not one, right? I think that can be very effective as a part of a full-on assault on inequality and poverty in the state. And Talarico is saying things like, we need to do something about the billionaires, but I need to see more substance because so far what we've gotten is a lot of rhetoric. I will also say, in a similar vein, and this is not a criticism of Talarico's faith or anything like this, Talarico speaking about his religious beliefs, I don't think that he should necessarily shy away from it, but I don't think that you can lean on that to put you over the finish line. I think that there is a little bit of strategizing from people who, in the same way that some folks were thinking with Colin Allred, oh, everyone in Texas likes football. They're going to go for the football guy. Oh, James Talarico is talking about Jesus. Conservatives, might be swayed by that. I'll tell you right now that what we've seen from the Republican Party over the past few years, these aren't people who are regularly quoting the Bibles. That's why they use terms like biblical values instead of quoting scripture. I don't think that like this is going to be as effective as maybe pulling people from the other side. I do think you could maybe win that in combination with strong progressive economic populist policies. I think 100% if you start talking about how ridiculous the cost of healthcare are in this state, how horrendous and complicated the system that we have here is, and say, hey, we should have a simple system, Medicare for all, right? I think that could be very effective. I think that standing up for workers' rights in a state where you're seeing the state government do things like taking back water break protections and protecting the interests of somebody like Elon Musk, I think you could do a lot of that kind of stuff. And if you want to combine that with the ability to kind of push back against stupidity like the Ten Commandments, I think that could be very effective. But what we've seen with Talarico since his name started getting floated around here has been a heavy reliance on the kind of like rhetorical thing, the things that made him popular. And again, I can't blame a consultant or an advisor who says, hey, do what is popular. But if you want to win, we're going to have to see more substance. And I'm not trying to be unfair because this is the day that he launched his campaign. But I will also say Talarico didn't fall from the moon, right? There is this kind of idea is like, oh, just because he's new to you means he's new to everybody else. I've been waiting for a little while to see a little bit more substance on the policy side from Talarico, not just since his name started getting floated for Senate, but in the past couple of years, as he has been somebody who people have been whispering, questioning about, calling friends, asking them if they would support him, right? I've been wondering this for a long time. So I'm not trying to preload or prejudge or anything like that, but I am saying I think if you wanted this to be as effective, if you want to drop the primary question about being all red one way or the other, if you want to beat the Republicans in a state where that hasn't happened, in 3 decades, you're going to have a little bit more substance here, and we'll see what ends up happening there. Now, I wanted to speak to an attack against him that's kind of gotten a lot of play. Unless you had something you want to add before.
Yeah, I just want to back you up on saying the just relying on the church stuff, as Kendrick Lamar says.
It's not enough.
Um, I agree. Like, has
I mean,
Trump?
am I being unfair? Am I being
No,
unfair?
no. I think it's not bad, but I do think it's the sort of thing where Dems see it and they say this is the ticket.
Yeah.
And I don't think voters. I don't think they live in the country that they think they do when it comes to that stuff.
Well, it's also because Democrats fall into this trap all the time where they imagine like the median voter in this country. And they kind of, that's why you have like Amy McGraths out there. You know, even Democrats who
Exactly.
supported her were like, they weren't like, I'm so excited about this. They're like, I can imagine this Republican guy would be excited about this. And I think that really in politics, there's a lot of value in just trying to be like honest and articulating your position. And Democrats as a whole, are pretty bad faith about their stuff. Instead of just saying like, oh, we want this person who advocates for this or that, it's always like this kind of abstraction, you know, of what they think that somebody else would like. You know, just argue for what you believe in, and support the people who you would like to back.
No one last fall was saying, you know what? I could imagine people getting excited about is a Muslim guy who's the son of a Bollywood director, uh, and we need to go all in on them as like because people will love that. No, Zohran ran because he's like, oh, people are pissed off at the cost of living crisis not being responded to by politicians. We're going to speak to that, and then he did it. Right? Like there's these simple look, the religion stuff's useful for getting your foot in the door, which is an important thing. And that's sort of where like whereas Mamdani can sort of effortlessly, people were talking about how cool he is, he can go into different areas and speak with a certain type of fluency to folks with language they understand. But that's just again a foot in the door thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I will just say as last things, I think the religion stuff is more appealing to like Democrats who like the idea of having a Democrat talk in that way, than it is necessarily to like across the aisle persuasion. But I could be wrong.
Oh yeah, for Democrats, hearing a religious guy say he supports abortion versus like a feminist, they'd much rather listen to the feminist or listen to the religious guy and push him forward.
I did want to talk about something because it's gotten a lot of play. Now, this has been kind of was pushed up by the right, by organizations like Texas Scorecard here, which, if you don't know, is just a kind of bizarre sham organization that supports some of the more lunatic fringe parts of the Texas Republican Party, the ruling party in the state. And they've made a lot of play about this over the past few days. But it has been kind of picked up by many other folks, and it's something that now I'm seeing on Twitter a lot, which is about some of the major donors to James Tallarico, particularly Miriam Adelson. And James Tallarico, that is his largest donor as alleged member. It was around, I believe, $59,000, which remember that these kind of ledge campaigns don't really racket the same amount of money as other groups do. Now, why is he getting that money? The reason he's getting that money is because the Adelsons, for a very long time, have been wanting to expand their casino and gambling business into the state of Texas. Something that I completely oppose, as we've covered a lot on this program, and we've seen the horror and disgusting consequences of these kind of systems. Now, gambling makes a lot of money. They like to throw it around, and they throw it around like candy in the Texas legislature. I'm not saying that as an excuse. I'm just noting it as like something that is just like a kind of known that money is floating around for anyone willing to take it. Now, Tallarico has said that he supports and has voted in support of casinos and gaming in the state of Texas, something that I very much oppose. He frames it as opposing the nanny state. I think that it's just a good thing to not allow big billionaires to prey upon the hopes and desperations of everyday folks. But that is just worth noting. Tallarico has been somebody who has been pretty outspoken in the Texas legislature against the amount of money that's getting thrown around there, and has, put forward bills to cap the amount of donations that people can get from these wealthy donors. Something that I support and I think is good. So no real secret there, just worth or anything like that, and it's not an excuse or any justification or anything like that. It's just a little bit of kind of context.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I would like to say, like, I'd like to hear what somebody who wants to represent me and my family. I'll tell you a big issue. I talk to my family regularly. I talk to my mother regularly. I'll tell you one thing that they would like to hear about is about whether or not, James Tallarico is okay with Israel murdering children and continuing to support that state. So that is a question that I have. I think that is very reasonable to ask as well.
Has he avoided saying anything on that?
For the most part, as far as I know, yep.
Not good, James. Not good. And I
No,
also would just say, like,
people are going to
nannies.
say, "Hey, it's first day," and I think that's fair enough. But I would like to. My top note: you want to ask? Hey, I watched Left Reckoning, and James Tallarico announced for Senate. What's David's line? I said, "Hey, I think some of the video stuff is interesting. Some of the rhetoric's great. I'd like to see some more substance, and then we can have a conversation." And that's my position. And I think that's probably going to be the position of many people. Now, you can go pretty far when you're running against Colin Allred, but the whisper and the rumors are that a certain calf cramping boy, Mr.
Born for this, Mr. Born for
Mr.
this.
Beto O'Rourke, and for people who, let me see if I can pull this up without, because it has been deleted, of course.
While you do that, I would just like to say, the nannies don't play a huge role in anti-gambling. The idea that it's a nanny to say, "Hey, we're not going to let capitalists and large corporations
I
take
think
an
you can get
investment."
yourself into a position where you, you
All
stop doing
time.
your duty as a governor. In government, when you're afraid to take on those kind of moral issues.
Yeah.
But for people who don't remember this, this is from 2018, a deep cut from should I even say their name? Because I think they're kind of off Twitter or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyways, at one time, a very, very well-known kind of Twitter villain said, Ojeda and Avenatti as candidates are like the guy who thinks good sex is pumping away while you're making a grocery list in your head, wondering when he'll be done. Beto O'Rourke is like the guy who is all sweet and nerdy, but holds you down and makes you come until your calves cramp. So there's some rumors that a Mr. Beto O'Rourke may be jumping in the Senate race as well, and we'll be watching.
Look out. You better start doing your calf raises now, ladies.
Well, on that sensual note, we're going to go over to the postgame, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. If you want, Matt, you could give them a little bit of a preview of what we'll be responding to, or we can just let the imagination run wild.
Well, David Pakman's done with the left, and David Pakman's former producers feel like they have blood on their hands. So we'll be getting into that a little bit in the postgame.
All right, folks. Well, please check out Nilo's book. And thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate y'all. The show's not over. We're going to postgame, patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get access to it. Come and hang out with us on the other side. You're not going to want to miss this Pakman breakdown that we're cooking up, friends.